Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. So today we're going to talk about how awesome the Shroud is for a while. The Shroud, while we don't have any hard data, I think most can agree that it's been DDO's most popular raid historically. In my opinion, it's the best design raid in the game, and I want to talk a little bit in this video about why it's been so successful, what made it such a good piece of content, and why it was run for so long, and still sometimes run today. I think the main reason is because the Shroud did something that not a lot of raids do. It had a mix of both amazing loot and it was amazingly well designed in terms of the raid. It was really, really fun. And I think you see a lot of raids that have been introduced the past, say, 3, 4, 5 years that have had either great loot or have been fun, but haven't really had both. Most raids do seem to either have one or the other, and when you can have a raid like the Shroud that has a great crafting system, great, really desirable loot, and a raid that's just really well designed and really fun to run repeatedly, you have a big hit. So let's start by talking about the crafting system. Green steel crafting is a tiered system, so you have 3 different layers of materials basically to craft, and you can craft up to 3 tiers on your loot. And a lot of players really like this kind of system, and it's why crafting systems have been used repeatedly, and I think a lot of people at this point have probably gotten sick of them. There has been some complaints about people getting sick of these crafting systems, but I think the success of the Shroud is why so many crafting systems have continued to be reintroduced and introduced, because they found out that, hey, the players really like that, so let's keep giving it to them. And we've seen a lot of systems emulate green steel crafting. So another thing players like is it's a grind-based system, and if you want to kind of see my more explanation of that, I'll link below in the description my grind-based system versus luck-based systems video I did a little while back. But basically, it's a grind-based system, so you can get what you want. There's not a ton of variance, say as something like the Shard Seal Scroll system was, where people were grinding Von 5 and 6 for years to get the sort of Shadow Shard. We don't have anything like that. While there is some luck in pulling the right Shard of Power that you need or pulling the Tier 3 ingredient that you want, there's not enough luck there to not ensure you from getting what you want if you just run the raid repeatedly. You're going to get what you want, and there's also other ways of getting the ingredients you want. You can trade for them from other players. You can buy them, and there's a lot of that going on when Shroud was in its heyday back when Cap was 20. The weapons you could craft with green steel crafting were excellent in-game weapons at the time. Now, they weren't the best in-game weapons. Say stuff like the Epic Sword of Shadow was the best weapon, say when Cap was 20 for melees, and you had other really good weapons like the Epic Antique Great Axe from the House P chain. But they were still very good in-game weapons, and they were great leveling weapons, because the thing that made these weapons super desirable is they had a low minimum level. So despite it being a level 20 cap at the time, you could start using these weapons. I think it's level 11 you can start using them, 10 or 11, I can't remember which one exactly, but you can start using them early. And the same goes for items you could craft from green steel. And there are a lot of really desirable ones, like HP items that could give you stacking HP, SP items that could give you a boost to your SP bar. Concordiant Opposition was really popular, that every time you got hit you would get some SP back, kind of like a torque but not quite as good. There are also a lot of really good clickies you could craft, like Raised Dead clickies and Displacement clickies, and a lot of these really gave a lot of incentive for people to rerun this raid, because even if you already had the tier 3 weapon you wanted, you could always use more Displacement clickies or Raised Dead clickies. I think a lot of people would craft 3 or 4. I have, I think, around 4 or 5 Displacement clickies I've crafted and I carry around with me in my inventory. And if anything else, this raid might have introduced too much power creep in that regard. If I have to criticize it for something, I think this would be the thing I would criticize it most for, because things like Displacement clickies especially, I remember the devs commenting on this, is that Displacement clickies being so valuable really made it hard for them to design content going forward. And I think this is why we see so many mobs in epic content, legendary content with true seeing, just because displacement, really permanent displacement for the most part, if you're willing to go through the hassle of clicking your green steel item, really permanent displacement is basically available for every character, because you can just craft as many green steel displacement clickies as you want and keep clicking it. And of course the Raised Dead clickies made it really easy for other classes to raise dead, so you didn't need to necessarily have a class around that could raise people inherently with a spell. The crafting system gave the game's economy a real boost. It facilitated a lot of trade in the game. It was really popular back in the day for people to say, just run Shroud for ingredients, tier 3 ingredients, and then sell them for platinum. It was pretty common for people to trade their large ingredients for other large ingredients. So the raid, more than probably any other raid, gave you a bunch of reasons to continue to run it even after you've crafted what you wanted, because again, you could just run stuff to get tier 3 ingredients to trade for platinum, or to just trade for other ingredients, or you can continue to make more greenstone clickies. So there's a lot of loot that you could get, and really cool, interesting, creative loot at the time. So that's enough about the crafting system. Let's move on to talking about why the actual raid is so good. The lore of the Shroud is that basically this raid is a test for warriors. It's a proving ground, so it's presented in a series of different tests, and each test does challenge the party in different ways. The phase 1 of the raid tests your DPS. Phase 2 tests party coordination and organization. Phase 3 tests your party's problem-solving skills, and phase 4 and 5s are your classic boss fights. So let's go ahead and talk about each phase individually. Phase 1, probably the most criticized phase of the raid, just because it's pure DPS. But even though it's a pure hack and slash, I never had too much of an issue with it. I think we need some DPS emphasized content like this in sections and raids like this, so that melee DPS in particular is worth building for. And the only problem I seem to have with hack and slash and just pure DPS sections like this is if they're overused in content. And I think you could argue that that has been the case some in the past and other pieces of content. But overall, I have no problem with just a strict DPS hack and slash section, as long as it's just not the only thing the raid does. And again, it's important to give melee something to do. So the portals in particular were single target. They had a lot of immunities, so you really needed some DPS. They had a lot of HP, so you needed some melees there to really help beat those portals down, which gave melees a really good role in that content, which is important. And I think it's something we haven't seen done as well today. We don't see melees giving content hasn't been designed, I don't think, as well in terms of giving melees something to do that you really say, hey, we really want some melees in this raid or this quest, because we need to get through X part of this quest or raid, and melees are the best at that, getting through that. So that's good. And DPS is fine as a DPS test. You know, you need to have your party built with a certain level of DPS to get through certain levels of content. So if you want to run, like back in the day, hard or elite Shroud, it's a test you need to pass. You should have a certain level of DPS to get through the raid, and I think that's fine. Phase 2 of the raid is the mini-boss section. It challenges your party organization, and it does this because the mini-bosses all have to be killed and the crystal destroyed in the center within a short time window. And I think this is good because it does emphasize, say, voice chat, which I think should be shouldn't be required, but it should be rewarded if you want to use voice chat in a raid. And you need to have some kind of party organization. It's good. Raids should require the party to work together and be coordinated, so that's cool. And I think we've seen this mechanic utilized and reutilized many times in future raids. So like the Thunderholm Shadow Dragon raid, we have the same kind of mechanic where you have to have Algarasa in the center and you have to kill her and pull the levers at the same time, so you have the same kind of timing mechanic. We also have seen this in Fall of Truth with the different dragon giant pairs where you have to bring them down at the same time. So it's a mechanic that I think is good and works really well. So I think we've seen the Shroud kind of spawn different versions of this mechanic in the future. Phase 3. So phase 3, I always really liked the Shroud light puzzles because I felt that they had, I don't know if it'd say infinite, but they had a lot of replay value. You would never quite get the same puzzle twice, so you couldn't just memorize one solution and then have to continually just repeat that one solution. So it actually required you to think every time you got into the raid, or you could use a solver, but it really did require you to get to actually think, because no 3x3 or 4x4 or 5x5 puzzle was going to be just like the last one. They're all a little different. The section is a nice breath of fresh air. I think it's really good to have a puzzle section in a raid like this, and the Shroud did it really well because it gave everybody their own puzzle to do. You were transported to your own little room. Everyone had a puzzle to do. Everyone had a role. Everyone had something to do. And I think that's a problem with some other raids, say like the Shadow Dragon raid, where really the whole puzzle can be done by just a couple of people, 1 or 2 people, and everyone else basically just sits there and watches, or they throw stuff in just like mobs in there just to fill the time, but it feels like a filler to me. It's not really engaging the whole party. I really like that this kind of puzzle section. I hope they do this in the future with raids. Have some kind of teleport section like this where you get teleported into individual rooms so everyone has their own puzzle to do. I really, really like that. I like there to be a puzzle section in raids, but I like it if everyone can actually participate. So Phase 4, and Phase 4 was one of the sections that was changed a bit in Legendary, a lot more than say 3 where they changed the wall a little bit, but in 4 they changed it quite a bit because in the old 4, in Heroic 4, if you die, you get put in a penalty box until Phase 5. And with the boss fight in Phase 4, there's nothing too crazy about the boss fight. It's kind of a standard boss fight, but it's cool because I really like that sense of dread almost that you get. It puts you on edge to know that if you couldn't die. If you died, you were out. You were in a penalty box until Phase 5, and that was really cool. And a lot of really good times came from that because sometimes, say, half your party would die, and the other half of the party would have to kind of power everyone through the rest of it. And that was just really cool, really fun, and really satisfying to be in one of those runs where, say, 2/3 of the party died, and you managed to pull everyone through. You and a couple other people managed to pull everyone through the rest of that phase. That was just cool. It was just really fun. Harry in this raid has a mix of both ranged and up close attacks, so both your casters and your melee DPS are prone to getting hit and attacked, so that's good. It's threatening really to everyone. Phase 5, nothing too special about Phase 5, nothing too different from Phase 4. It's a standard boss fight again, but the boss fight does a good job of emphasizing teamwork. We had a lot of that in this raid that made the raid not translate as well into Legendary just because you didn't have to have that Trinity mechanic, and this kind of raid was really designed around that Trinity mechanic of having your melees, your casters, and your healers in different spots and really rewarding that kind of team play. So let's talk about Legendary a little bit because this whole video has mainly been focused on the Heroic. I know they did do a Legendary version of it too. I guess what has it been, a couple years now. And I don't think the Legendary version was praised that much by the community. I mostly saw kind of mediocre to kind of critical reviews of it. And for me, it was a little disappointing because I looked at the loot and there was not a single thing I felt was worth going for in my main character, a melee cleric character. I didn't feel there was anything worth going after. So that was a little disappointing. The weapons weren't really worth going after. There was other weapons that were a lot easier to get. So it was more of a horizontal power move than a vertical one. So while I understand them wanting to keep power creep under control, I think when they redid the Legendary section of the Shroud, that was a time that warranted power creep, because if you're not going to power creep what probably is the most popular, best piece of content ever in your game when you introduce a Legendary version of it, then what are you going to power creep? That's the prime candidate to introduce some power creep, and power creep is needed at times, and I think that was one of the times. Other times they should restrain it, but at a time like the Legendary Shroud, that was such a big deal because it was a Legendary version of the most popular probably a piece of content in the game. That was when they really should have introduced more power creep, and I know there was some stuff there, particularly for casters. There's a lot of really good caster sticks, but I don't think there was enough for a lot of classes there. There wasn't enough to make that raid really worth going for and really worth repeating over and over and over within a span of what, six months to a year to really keep people playing. And they made some minor changes, like I mentioned in the puzzle section. They made a little change, not with the wall, make it a little harder. They did add a boss fight to the end. I didn't feel the boss fight was necessary because it was just straight up melee DPS. There was no really different, interesting mechanic they added. It was just extra hack and slash. I didn't feel it was needed. I didn't think it made the raid any better. It just made the raid longer. So I would have rather kept that out and just kept the raid the same. The wall stuff was fine. I don't like them taking the penalty box out on Phase 4 because, I mean, come on, why would you take that out? I don't know, if it just felt unnecessary, just making it easier just to make it easier. I don't understand why they did that. I did even see many people complain about the penalty box mechanic, so I'm not even really sure why they changed that. I thought that should have stayed in just because it was a unique mechanic that was unique to that raid, and it made it special and cool. And like I explained, it did provide a lot of really cool experiences to where, say, half your party would die and you would have the challenge of kind of pulling through the rest of the phase with just half the party. I thought there was a lot of cool scenarios that made completing that part satisfying, and by removing that, you just made phase 4 just a standard regular boss fight, which I didn't like. But despite the negatives I'm mentioning with Legendary, it's still a great piece of content. The Shroud overall did everything so well. Great gear, great content, and crafting and trading. So back in the day when this was introduced, not referring to Legendary again, but Heroic, when it was introduced, it did all these things so well, and it's one of the few raids that for such a long time gave you lots of reasons to run it. And I still think today you still have a lot of reasons to run it, because green steel weapons are still amazing weapons to have while you are TRing, if you're TRing in Heroics a lot, if you're going for Heroic past lives. Displacement clickies are still super useful today, just like Raised Dead clickies from Heroic Green Steel are still super useful today and worth grinding out if you don't have them. So to me, this is why I believe the Shroud is one of the best, if not the best, designed piece of content in the game. And I wanted to make a video like this because I have mentioned a lot in the past why I like the Shroud so much, but I've never dedicated a full video to explaining why. So guys, that's going to be it for this video. Comment below and let me know what you think about the Shroud, if you like it as much as I do, and any stories you might want to share. That would be cool to read. So that's going to be it for today. You all have a good one. Take care. Have a good one. I'll see you next time.